Well, good afternoon, everyone. This is Joanne Stevens, and this is our Thursday call-in show, and I want to welcome all of our listeners. And I want to thank everybody for joining us today. We have a very special guest today, Shelia Dey, who is the Executive Director of the Western Manufactured Housing Association. Shelia is based in Sacramento, and I've known Shelia for a good many years, and you're really in for a treat to listen to Shelia and some of the topics and that she's working on for the association. Shelia participates in the National Trade Association events, so she has a breadth of knowledge of what's happening across the United States with the communities and the mobile home business. Before I introduce Shelia, I want to make a few announcements. Next week, May 18th, I'm going to interview Mark Borchardt from the Stevens Company, Stevens Homes and Communities, and Mark is going to present some processes and systems for helping park managers and park owners to get their home sites cleaned up, and also some thoughts on getting 100% of the rent collected every month and early in the month. So that'll be May 18th. On May 25th, Jean Trowbridge of Crown Funding will talk about raising money to buy investment real estate, especially mobile home parks or really any kind of commercial investment real estate. And Jean is an expert on raising money and also the legal do's and don'ts for when you raise money. And his philosophy is if you're going to raise the money, make sure that you do it right. Also, just returned from the Las Vegas Congress that's put on by the Manufactured Housing Institute, and I encourage everybody to make sure to attend last year. It was a very worthwhile seminar, lots of education, lots of people, lots of good exhibitors. So if you're in the mobile home business or the park business, it's definitely worth your time to go. And one last thing is I want to announce the dates for the George Allen Annual Roundtable, which will be held in Indianapolis this year on September 6th, 7th, and 8th. So there'll be more details coming out. The registration isn't open yet, but that is always a very good event to learn more and network with other owners and vendors and suppliers for the mobile home and park business. One other thing is to remind our listeners that December 10th and 11th in Cedar Rapids, we're having an owners symposium. And in that symposium, we're also going to have a workshop for park owners. So everybody will leave with evaluation on their park or community if they wish to bring some of their numbers with them. But we'll also have experts speak. We're having appraisers speak about trends in value. Also, an accountant who's very well versed in capital gains tax and how to get a rough idea of what your capital gains tax is if you do sell or are thinking about selling, and other experts as well. So it'll really be a good symposium to learn more about best practices and knowing what your property is worth. So I'm very enthusiastic to introduce Shelia Dey, who is a good friend and also has been a very effective and knowledgeable executive director in California. And Shelia is recognized on a national level. She is respected by her peers for the the things that she gets done. And a lot of her work is in the political sphere, and then a lot of it is working with, there's a lot of members in her organization. So Shelia wears many hats. And Shelia, are you with us?
Yeah, I am, Joanne. I'm right here.
Well, thank you for joining us. And I'm sure you have some things you would like to talk about, but I wanted to just ask you to get started about what do you see as maybe the top 2 or 3 topics that associations are challenged with accomplishing these days?
Specific to the mobile home park industry associations or all associations?
Mobile home park associations.
I think really for us in California, our main focus is incredible activity at the state and local level that impacts mobile home parks. We are seeing a dramatic increase in agitation for rent control at the local level. We're seeing a new pattern that may be unique to California, but I'm not sure. But we are having residents organize to put on the ballot locally rent control initiatives. And
wow.
So we had that happen in Humboldt County, and that effort was supported by an organization named Action, and that is a national organization that is also affiliated with the Corporation for Economic Development, which also has a manufactured housing effort. And their goal is to have all the investor-owned properties, mobile home parks, be taken over by the residents, and essentially to eliminate investor owners in the business. So that
is heavens.
And they were very active in Humboldt County, agitating for this rent control, which was completely unnecessary because the rents in Humboldt County in the nicest parks were $400, and those parks are right near the Pacific Ocean. So we unfortunately lost that battle. The voters of Humboldt County approved the rent control ordinance, so that is now on the ballot. But we are seeing that all over the state of California. So it is locally, and we also have a tremendous amount of really negative legislation that has been introduced in the California legislature this year.
And is this coming from resident groups, or where is this coming from?
Well, some of it is coming from the resident groups, and then some of it is coming from legislators themselves. We have a bill that has been just recently amended. It's SB 147, and it by Senator Dodd, who's from the Sonoma County area, which is right next to Napa Valley. Mm-hmm. And that bill would essentially allow a homeowner to have anyone they want live in their home. So it's essentially an Airbnb for mobile home parks.
Wow. But Shelia, haven't some of the cities in California, such as San Francisco, haven't they made that against the law to rent your home to Airbnb?
Yes, they have. So we have a state law that would basically allow that.
I see. Okay, so the state law is overriding the local ordinance.
Right, but it would only apply to mobile home parks, and it is also in Sonoma County. I think almost every single city has rent control, so it would allow a resident, a homeowner, to rent out their home for any amount they want to what's called a companion. but then they would still enjoy the benefit of rent control.
Oh my gosh. So how does that affect, when the tenant originally moves into the park, and probably most park owners do a background check of some sort. How does that affect, does the companion person or the Airbnb person, do they have any application process? Or do they just move in?
No, there's no requirement, and it essentially changes our guest statute that we currently have on the books, where we can require the guest after 20 days to register through the rules and regulations of the park. It just basically eliminates that ability of the park owner to require the guest to register. The companion. We're calling these people companions.
Companions.
Well, under the bill.
Under the bill. That seems to go against one of the strengths that many park owners in the United States use as a selling point, that they do screen the tenants, and they do their best to know who's living in the park and keep a pretty tight rein on who's moving into the park, so somebody doesn't move in and then their companion, this is the first time I've heard it called a companion, but somebody moves in and the park owner doesn't know who's living there, and of course they don't want anybody living there that has a criminal background necessarily. So that is a game changer, don't you think?
It's a disaster. So we're strongly opposing the bill, but we have a 2/3 majority of Democrats in both houses, and we have a Democratic governor. So we have our work ahead of us.
You do. I think it's too bad we can't. We have it's in the news all the time how many state legislatures have a abundance of Republican legislatures. It's too bad we couldn't, exchange or lend you some of our, trade, because other legislatures have their issues, but this is the first I have heard of this. Do you know of any other states where this is happening or being talked about?
No, I don't.
Yeah,
I'm sure it's unique to California.
It probably is, and ever since I've been in the business, from time to time, the topic of rent control does pop up, and that's always been one of the, strong points about the mobile home park business, is that when it has popped up in a state legislature, that it's never gone anywhere, with the exception of California. And
well, they also have it in New Jersey.
In New Jersey, okay, interesting. So I think that's, if you're a park owner or manager listening to this call, it's just, you might remind yourself, no matter what your problems you're having with your community or managing the property, it could be worse. But Shelia, when we were in Las Vegas last week, that seems like about a year ago, but do you recall that there were at least, when I was with you, at least 2 people came up, or maybe 3, and said that they either had bought a park in California, they were non-Californians, buying a park in California, or wanting to buy a park in California. Do you think that they're aware of this rent control? I mean, I would think that they must be.
Yes, most owners are aware that we have rent control, and some investor owners are not worried about rent control, and they, go ahead and purchase the community. So it is. It depends on the management's philosophy. Some of the big investor owners don't want anything to do with rent control, but some of them are game for it, and they're not worried about it.
Yeah, I think as long as people have a plan of how to deal with it, like anything else. And of course, nationwide, we are seeing more resident-owned communities, but I think resident-owned communities have been around for about 20 years at least, maybe longer. And aside from California, it seems like the number of communities that they own is a pretty insignificant number of communities. Like
I think
maybe,
they've made quite an impact. Rock USA has made quite an impact in New Hampshire.
Yes.
And they've tried to make somewhat of an impact in New York.
And resident-owned communities, which is Rock, and they have bought communities here and there in the Midwest, and I think the ones that they have bought, they have had pretty good success. I think their biggest challenge when they're buying a park is with the owner, because many owners just can't understand how a resident could own their community when they can barely pay their lot rent. So that's that's usually what I hear from park owners is there's no way this is going to work. So I wanted to ask you, so that's the rent control is one huge topic. What other topics are you working on that are challenging for you and also for the mobile home park owners and anybody who's in the mobile home business?
Well, one of our big issues this year, and has been for some time, is the crime in the communities and residents who have basically outrageous and egregious conduct in the communities and getting those people evicted from the community. We have what's called just cause eviction in California, so it takes quite a while to get someone evicted. And when you have a resident who has committed a crime in the park, you still have to go through the same eviction procedure, give them a 3 and 60-day notice, and they can stay in the park even though they've committed a crime in the park.
Wow. So that is that can be pose some problems for the other residents and for the management.
It is a huge problem, and we had a bill in this year to try to deal with that, modeled after a statute in Oregon. And unfortunately, the bill did not pass out of Senate Judiciary Committee. But we are going to continue to pursue that legislation. We're going to try to do some amendments to it to make it so that the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee is not so opposed to the bill. But crime in the communities is increasing, and we are having quite a bit of trouble with that.
And do you have any thoughts, or do you know why the legislature would have a problem with removing that person from the mobile home park that had committed a crime?
Well, one of the things that the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee basically brought up was what would happen to that she considers people who commit crimes mentally ill. What would happen to that mentally ill person if they didn't have anywhere to live?
I see.
Essentially, it's the burden of the park owner, in her view, to deal with the mentally ill person.
I see. Well, it seems like that would lead to park owners doing even more restrictive screening, or being more restrictive of who they would approve to move into the mobile home park.
Well, we're not allowed to do criminal background checks in California, so we have that restriction.
And how long has that been in place?
Quite a while. It's been. We're only allowed to basically determine if the person has the financial ability to pay rent and comply with the rules and regulations of the park.
Mhm. Mhm. Well, Sheila, there are a lot of parks in California, and you have some really large park owners, who own multiple communities, and they're also very successful park owners. How do they deal with this?
It's difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Many of the park owners now use management companies, and I would say probably 70% of the parks now are run by management companies.
Okay, just so that they don't have to deal with the day-to-day problems that this legislation may pose.
Well, and also most of our parks were built in the 60s and 70s, so
Sure.
they're now owned by second, third, and in
Sure.
some cases fourth generation.
Mm-hmm.
And many of the people that are in the second and third generation are, professionals, and they don't have the time to run their mom and dad's park anymore. So
Right.
they have management companies run them.
Right. So they have the income of owning the park without having the day-to-day responsibilities.
Right. And they don't have time to run them. They'll be doctors and lawyers, and they don't have time to run a park.
Mhm. Mhm.
And that's becoming more and more common.
I think that's an interesting phenomena in your state. In the Midwest, that we see very little of that, which is surprising because we are getting more out-of-state owners in the Midwest. Most of the parks that are being sold to many of the buyers are from California, but they're also from Seattle and the East Coast also, but they tend to manage the parks themselves. I'm rarely asked for the name of a management company. When I am, I can only think of two I would recommend, and they just want to manage within a relatively short distance of wherever they're located, meaning the park management company.
Right.
So that's a phenomena we have not seen yet, but maybe we will as more owners, pass the parks on to their kids, and so on. So, is there another issue that you wanted to talk about that you're dealing with in your state?
Unusually, California has, when the parks were built, the park owners put the utility systems in themselves. The investor-owned utilities did not build the systems. So the parks are what we call master metered, sub-metered.
Okay.
And many of those systems are aging, and so they need to be replaced or upgraded. So we're working on a program with the California Public Utilities Commission where those electric and gas systems are being replaced by the investor-owned utilities.
Okay.
So that program is underway right now.
So that sounds like a massive initiative.
Yes, it's a pilot program that applies to 10% of the spaces in the investor-owned utilities territory, but the utilities have all applied to have the pilot program renewed. So we're hopeful that the California Public Utilities Commission will approve that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so does that mean that many of your park owners bill directly to the tenant for their electric consumption?
They get what's called a master meter bill, and then they sub-meter the tenant's spaces, and then they bill the tenant for the use of the electricity.
Okay. And is that true for natural gas? Or
yes.
Okay. Well, that is quite unusual because most states that I've worked in anyway, that is a rare occurrence. Probably.
Right, and that makes the mobile home park owner, in the case of gas, a pipeline operator, and they have to comply with all the federal requirements of being a pipeline operator.
Sure, yeah, which is significant and fraught with opportunities to make a misstep and get sideways with some agency.
Yeah, it's a big responsibility.
For sure, for sure. So Shelia, with all of these responsibilities and really very really significant topics that you're working on, do you have a mantra or a philosophy that you use to kind of keep yourself going when these are not easy things to work on or to accomplish?
Well, we just know that the park owners always need us, so we're always busy.
Yeah, you must have incredible job security. That
we have 3 people in the field who work for WMA, and all they do is deal with rent control. So we are busy, and we have 2 registered lobbyists at the state level who lobby for us as well.
Well, that's so you and how many people are on your staff?
There's 15 people on our staff. We have about 1,800 mobile home parks in membership in WMA. There's over 4,000 mobile home parks in the state of California. But our regulator, the Department of Housing and Community Development, looks at anything that is 2 spaces and above to be a mobile home park. So,
I see.
A member would normally not have fewer than 10 spaces.
Okay.
To be a member.
Sure. And I've been on the board here in Iowa for quite a few years, and it always surprised me. Some people, when they buy a park in our state, they immediately join the state association, and then some people don't. And do you have any thoughts on making the case to new owners, or maybe even not new owners, people that for whatever reason don't belong to the association, somebody at your office charged with recruiting new park owners, members?
Yeah, we have a membership director, and we do our best to try to get people to join, because typically it's the non-members who cause the problems, and we end up with threatened rent control and issues at the state legislature because of people who are ignorant of the laws. Right.
And which sort of gives everybody a black eye, and that is probably true in most states. So for any state association directors who might be on this call, or just for any person in the mobile home business or the park business who may not be a member of their association, do you have maybe 1 or 2 major reasons why somebody ought to belong to a state association?
Well, I think one of the biggest reasons that people join WMA is for help with their issues, with legal issues and park operation issues. They join to use our forms. They really like our Forms Online program. We have a program where you can sign up and have the forms online, and they autofill, and it's a great service for them, and they like that.
That is a great service. It'd be interesting to know how many states do something like that, because yes, the forms are invaluable and can save a lot of time and also a lot of money there's probably many park owners who don't belong to their state association and pay their attorney to do all the research to draft the forms, which, you know, I have done that in the past. I mean, I've been a member of my state association ever since I've been in the business. But that is a great service to your members.
Yeah, they really appreciate that.
Mm-hmm. And I also wanted to ask you, Shelia, because you do have some, you know, so many good members who have, you know, have good parks and they're successful and they keep their parks up. You've known a lot of park owners over the years. What are a few things that you have seen that make these park owners successful?
I think the biggest thing that makes a park owner successful is that they want to provide a form of affordable and quality housing, and that they care about their residents. To me, that's the biggest part of being a successful park owner, is caring about your residents.
So that's number one, caring about your residents.
Right.
Yeah.
And providing a good service and providing a safe and clean environment and a clean park. And most of the park owners that I know that are successful and run successful parks, that's what they try to do.
Yeah, I think that's true. They just have kind of that natural affinity, or they learn to have an affinity for, you know, giving good value for the money that people pay.
Well, and they also believe in community. And the park owners who've been around a long time and like this business and are successful, is they like to create that community sense that is unique, I think, to the mobile home park business. That the people who live in our communities really enjoy the community feeling. They like to be in a community.
And do you have any, do you know of anything that they do to create that community feeling?
Oh, they have lots of activities, and they make sure their clubhouses are used. They make sure there's programs for the kids. They make sure there's after school care, after school tutoring. There's dog parks. There's all sorts of activities in those communities, and they really, you know, they'll put out a newsletter. They have potlucks, or they'll have dinners for the residents. They, you know, they really, you know, have Christmas parties, and whatever a holiday is, they'll have holiday events and Fourth of July events, and they like doing that, and that's something that they feel proud to do.
Yeah, I think that's something that's a little bit different in your state, that they're really they really do foster that community-ness, and knowing that maybe not every single resident will participate, but there's a lot of people who really do like community living. I remember reading quite a few years ago, one of the community owners in California, they actually had like sort of a sociologist on their, or maybe it was like one sort of a psychologist, sociologist on their staff that floated, you know, among the parks. So when somebody did have, you know, a family problem, or, you know, an alcohol problem, or, you know, they were there to help those residents, which that's the only time I've ever heard of anyone doing anything like that.
Yes, that did happen. That part had that person, and I think it was very much appreciated by the residents in those communities.
I bet it was, because people can tend to feel very alone and isolated when there is a problem in the family, or a problem with, you know, on the job, or just, you know, we live in a, you know, there's probably a great many people, a lot of single people in these communities who may feel like they don't really have anybody that they can talk to about their problems. So, and I also wanted to ask you, it's probably changed quite a bit in the last, I don't know, 5 to 10 years, but you are probably, there aren't that many women in this business, whether it's park owners, retail center owners, manufacturers, executive directors, suppliers, whether that be lenders, insurance, all the different businesses that feed into the mobile home park and mobile home business. How did you, get into this business, and how has it been being a minority, so to speak?
Well, when I came out of law school in 1979, women were maybe 30% of the law school classes. Now they're over 60%. So things have changed significantly since I started in this business. But when I got out of law school, I became a lobbyist. I was always interested in the legislative angle of business, and I went to work for the California Bankers Association. And at that point, that business was very much male dominated. So
sure.
most of the businesses that I've always worked for were, the majority of the people in the business were men, and that's common in every business. So I don't really look at life as where you're a minority. I feel like you're whatever you want to make yourself out to be.
Yeah, I think that's a good standard to follow for sure. Well, we just have a couple of minutes, and before we wrap up, I just want to say that I know you're very good at what you do. You're very effective, and you have the respect of your members there in California, and also industry people on a national basis. But I think the thing that I always think of, the thing I find unforgettable about you, Shelia, is your laugh. And so I hope with all of these really the challenges are not easy that you are working on, I hope you can somehow keep laughing.
I try. I try to find humor in everything.
Well, that's good. That's probably what makes you so effective at what you do. Well, Shelia, I want to thank you for being our guest today. And this interview with Shelia will be posted on YouTube, and with the bullet points of the important topics that we covered today. So next week, I will be interviewing Mark Borchardt, and we will be talking about processes and systems for keeping the keeping the home sites looking good. Well, thank you, Shelia.
Thank you so much, Joanne. I enjoyed it.
I did too. Take care.
Okay, bye-bye.
Okay, bye. Well, that concludes our call-in show today. Thanks, everybody, for listening.